The costliest victory in galactic history. The moment the words left Commander Drex's mouth, I felt an unbearable weight settle on my carapace. Congratulations, High Admiral Vorzac. Your brilliant military strategy has successfully conquered the small blue planet in the outer rim. The inhabitants call it Earth and themselves humans. What fascinating specimens they will make in our zoological gardens. His tentacles twitched in what passed for enthusiasm among the Crosian species, but I barely heard him. Something was wrong. I shifted uncomfortably in my command chair. I had led campaigns across the galaxy, crushed rebellions, and shattered planetary defenses, but never before had a victory felt like a defeat. And casualties? I asked, my voice harsher than intended. What's our loss ratio? Drex's compound eyes blinked rapidly, an unmistakable sign of nervousness. Well, that's the most remarkable part, sir. He hesitated, as if unsure whether to continue. We lost approximately 73% of our invasion force. Silence. A deafening silence. Then the words hit me like a plasma bolt to the thorax. 73%. 73%? I roared, my exoskeleton plates flaring in alarm. And you are congratulating me? Have you completely lost your neural function? Drex recoiled, his tendrils curling inward in a submissive posture. But sir, we won. The human governments surrendered after we destroyed their major cities. The remaining resistance is scattered and disorganized. Our occupation forces are establishing control as we speak. I slumped back in my chair, feeling the weight of so many lost Crosian lives pressing down on me. Show me the battle statistics again. The holographic display flickered to life. Numbers, graphs, death tolls. It was the most catastrophic victory in the history of the galactic Crosian Empire. We had arrived with 15,000 ships and nearly 7 million troops. We were returning with 450 ships and fewer than 2 million survivors. How? How did a pre-FTL civilization manage this level of damage? They shouldn't even have had energy weapons. Lieutenant Caxi, our intelligence officer, stepped forward. Sir, they didn't. What? At least not many. They fought us primarily with chemical propellant weapons and combustion vehicles. I stared at him. That's impossible. Caxi's mandibles twitched. I have the footage, sir. The main view screen switched to battlefield recordings. I watched in horror as human soldiers, fragile creatures with only 2 arms and no natural armor, charged directly into Crosian plasma fire. For every 100 humans that fell, one would get close enough to lob one of their primitive explosive devices, taking out 5 or 6 of our troops. They call those grenades, sir. Caxi explained. Simple, but effective. The footage changed. A Crosian walker unit, a 30-meter battle platform, towered over the battlefield. Tiny human vehicles swarmed it, attaching explosives to its legs. The walker toppled, crushing dozens of humans, but hundreds more poured forward. My mandibles clicked involuntarily. What are they doing? Don't they value their lives? Caxi hesitated. That's what makes them so dangerous, sir. They value something more than their individual survival. They call it freedom, and they are willing to die for it in numbers that defy all strategic logic. Drex made a nervous clicking sound. There's something else, sir. I turned sharply. More bad news? Drex's tendrils curled. The surrender, it wasn't exactly official. A terrible coldness settled into my thorax. What do you mean, not official? Drex gulped. The major human governments did issue formal surrenders after we destroyed their capitals, but there has been no cessation of hostilities. Our occupation forces are reporting attacks every hour. The humans are using something called guerrilla warfare. They strike quickly from hiding, then disappear back into the population. I rubbed my eye talks warily. So we haven't actually won. Drex hesitated. Technically, we have. We control their orbital space, their major population centers, and their global communication networks. And yet, our troops keep dying. I turned to Caxi. Lieutenant, what do your intelligence reports suggest we do? Caxi shifted uneasily. Sir, based on human history and psychology, we have 3 options. Go on. Caxi's mandibles twitched. 1. Full planetary genocide. Drex straightened. Acceptable. I scowled. The Emperor wants human specimens and Earth's resources, not a dead world. Caxi nodded. 2. Commit at least 30 million more troops to complete the occupation. Expected losses at least 60% over the next decade. Unacceptable. The Empire wouldn't sustain those losses for a single planet. I exhaled. And option 3? Caxi hesitated. Negotiate. The command bridge fell silent. In the 8,000-year history of the Crosian Empire, we had never negotiated with a defeated enemy. Negotiate? With primitives? Drex sputtered. Caxi pulled up a final video clip. They may not have our technology, but they have demonstrated remarkable adaptability. Look at this. The screen showed a human soldier holding a captured Crosian plasma rifle, but it had been modified. Somehow, within 2 weeks of combat, the humans had figured out how to reverse engineer our weapons and mount them onto their primitive vehicles. Sir, their learning curve is concerning. I stared at the human in the image. So small, so soft-looking, and yet I took a deep breath. Get me a direct communication link to their remaining leadership. Drex gasped. The Emperor will have your carapace mounted on his wall. I narrowed my eyes. The Emperor isn't here. He's not watching his invasion force get decimated by creatures who haven't even left their own solar system. I turned to Caxi. Prepare a full strategic assessment of human combat capabilities. To Drex, gather all intelligence on human diplomatic protocols. As my officers scrambled to follow orders, I studied the battle footage again. A human soldier, bleeding and missing a limb, dragging himself forward to place an explosive under a Crosian transport. What kind of species does that? I swallowed hard. The most dangerous kind. And we had just made them very, very angry. The negotiation that shouldn't exist. 3 rotation cycles later, I found myself facing a human delegation aboard our command vessel. For security reasons, we had established an atmospheric barrier between us. Humans required higher nitrogen levels and couldn't tolerate our methane supplements. The lead human, a female called Admiral Patel, stood rigidly across the barrier. She was darker skinned than some of her companions, with silver-streaked black fur on her head. Though physically unimposing, something about her bearing made my antennae twitch nervously. "Admiral Vorzac," she said through our translation matrix, her voice cold. "Your request for negotiation has been recognized." I exhaled slowly. Good. That meant there was still a chance to avoid complete annihilation. "Admiral Patel?" She raised a hand, stopping me. "However," she continued, "I should inform you that I represent only the United Earth Defense Coalition, not all human factions. Many refuse to recognize your right to exist, let alone negotiate." I let out an involuntary chittering laugh. "Your right to exist?" I repeated, incredulous. "We control the orbital approaches to your planet. We have destroyed your major cities." Patel didn't blink. "And yet, here you are, requesting talks rather than demanding our surrender." Beside me, Commander Drex vibrated with anger. "Insolent mammal. Your species loses 1,000 lives for every Crosian warrior. There are 8 billion of you, but how many Crosians can you sacrifice? Patel's mouth curved upward, showing teeth. Lieutenant Caxi had warned me that this expression could indicate amusement, aggression, or both. More than you can afford, Patel replied calmly. I raised a claw, silencing Drex before he could speak again. Admiral Patel, let's be practical. Your species has fought impressively, but prolonged resistance will only result in more human deaths. The Empire requires certain resources from Earth and a number of living specimens for our biological archives. Provide these, acknowledge Imperial authority, and we can reach an accommodation that minimizes further bloodshed. Patel's eyes hardened. Living specimens. She repeated the words slowly. You mean slaves, and resources. You mean the wealth of our planet. Her voice was steady, but something in it sent a ripple of unease down my exoskeleton. Admiral Vorzac, she continued, humans have a long history of dealing with conquerors. It rarely ends well for the conquerors. A younger human male stepped forward. Admiral, permission to show them Jakarta? She nodded. The human activated a device, and a projection appeared in the air between us. At first I thought the image was glitched. No, it couldn't be. This was one of our primary landing zones. A city we had secured early in the invasion. Or rather, what remained of it. Crosian troops were barricaded in hardened positions, unable to move through the streets. Every patrol that stepped outside was immediately attacked from multiple directions. Buildings rigged with explosives collapsed on our soldiers. Civilian-looking humans would approach our forces, offering food or information, only to detonate hidden weapons. This is happening in every occupied city, Patel said, her voice impassive. Your troops control their bases, and little else. I said nothing. Meanwhile, she continued, humans are studying every piece of Crosian technology we capture. Your energy weapons, your communication systems, your ship components from vessels we have shot down. Another human, Colonel Rivera, according to his introduction, spoke up. 3 days ago, we reverse-engineered the targeting system for your orbital bombardment platforms. I stiffened. Yesterday, we tested our countermeasures. Rivera tapped a control. The projection changed to a Crosian fleet cruiser, the Dominance. I remembered it well. It had suffered a reactor failure just hours before. Exploded in orbit. Rivera smirked. Wasn't an accident. My hemolymph ran cold. The Dominance's destruction had been reported as an internal malfunction. 8,000 Crosians lost. If humans could already interfere with our most secure weapon systems, Drex's voice trembled. You're bluffing. Patel ignored him. Here's our proposal, Admiral Vorzac. I braced myself. Withdraw your forces from Earth. Return all human captives. Establish an exclusion zone around our solar system. In exchange, we won't pursue your retreating forces. We will consider formal diplomatic relations with the Crosian Empire in 50 Earth years, once we have developed appropriate interstellar capabilities. I let out a harsh clicking sound. That's not a negotiation, I growled. That's a demand for our complete withdrawal. Patel's expression did not change. Yes, she said simply. It is. Drex slammed a fist on the console. The Empire does not retreat. I inhaled slowly. Control yourself, Vorzac. Think. In 8,000 years, we have never abandoned a conquest. Colonel Rivera made a strange barking sound. Laughter. Congratulations, he said, grinning. You've never met humans before. Patel slid a data device across the table. This contains our complete analysis of Crosian biology. I hesitated before picking it up. What am I looking at? Dr. Okafor, the human scientist, answered. Based on your dead, we have identified 17 Earth bacteria and viruses that could be weaponized against your species. I froze. Your methane respiratory supplements can be ignited with simple electrical charges. Drex's exoskeleton turned pale. Your ship hulls deteriorate when exposed to a common Earth acid we produce in industrial quantities. I stared at the device, then at Okafor. You're threatening biological warfare. Patel's eyes narrowed. We are demonstrating that we understand you better than you understand us. The room fell silent. For the first time, I realized the true danger of humans. They weren't just brave. They weren't just relentless. They were learning, and they were learning too fast. I clenched my mandibles. I must consult with Imperial Command. Patel nodded once. You have 24 hours. She met my gaze. After that, we launch coordinated offensives against all your positions simultaneously. She leaned in slightly. And Admiral Vorzac? The next wave of attacks won't be aimed at reclaiming territory. I swallowed. They will be focused on maximizing Crosian casualties. The Empire's arrogance will be its doom. The Imperial hologram loomed before me, flickering with static as Supreme Commander Ziltherac glared down at me from his distant war chamber. Admiral Vorzac, his segmented eyes narrowed. Your recommendation is denied. The Empire does not retreat. I suppressed the urge to curse. Supreme Commander, with respect, you are not seeing the situation clearly, I said carefully, forcing my mandibles to remain still. These humans are primitives who got lucky, Ziltherac interrupted. Nothing more. Your casualty reports are concerning, but not unprecedented. I am dispatching the 7th Imperial Fleet to reinforce your position. 3,000 ships, 20 million troops. We will crush this resistance completely. A deep, sinking dread filled my thorax. Sir, more troops won't solve this problem, I said as steadily as I could. The humans are adapting to our technology, our tactics, our biology. They aren't fighting conventionally. They are fighting asymmetrically, exploiting every weakness they find. Ziltherac's mandibles clicked in irritation. Admiral Vorzac, you sound like you admire these creatures. I clenched my claws. I respect their capabilities. I corrected, as any prudent military commander should. But Ziltherac wasn't listening. You will delay them until reinforcements arrive. That is all. The transmission cut out before I could protest. I collapsed into my resting cradle, the weight of inevitability pressing down on me. 30 rotation cycles. That was how long it would take for the 7th Fleet to arrive. By then, how many more Crosian lives would be lost? How much more of our technology would the humans reverse engineer? A soft chime announced Lieutenant Caxey's presence. Enter. Caxey stepped inside, his normally composed demeanor visibly shaken. Sir, he said, we have completed the analysis of the human data device. I sat up. And? Caxey's voice dropped to a whisper. Their biological assessment is accurate, disturbingly so. They have identified vulnerabilities in our respiratory, circulatory, and nervous systems that even our own medics consider classified information. I felt my gastric sac clench. How? How could they learn so much so quickly? Caxey's mandibles twitched. They are natural pattern recognizers, sir. They had been studying our dead. I forced myself to exhale. Time estimate? Caxey hesitated. Days, not cycles. And then his voice dropped even further. Sir, there's another development. Go on. Caxey took a deep breath. Our long-range sensors have detected unusual activity in their asteroid belt. I frowned. Their asteroid belt. What could they possibly be doing? Then it hit me. They're weaponizing their own asteroids. Caxey nodded grimly. They appear to be attaching primitive propulsion systems to large asteroids, redirecting them toward our fleet formations. I felt the coldest fear I had ever known settle into my carapace. Primitive or not, a sufficiently large asteroid traveling at high velocity would cause catastrophic damage, regardless of our shield technology. "How many?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. 17, Caxi said, and counting. Before I could respond, the doors burst open. Commander Drex stormed in, violating every protocol of military discipline. "Sir," he was panting, his exoskeleton pale. "The humans have launched simultaneous attacks on all our ground positions." I shot to my feet. "How bad?" Drex's mandibles twitched. "They're using our own weapons against us." A sick feeling washed over me. "Explain." The main view screen activated, showing chaotic battlefronts. Human soldiers wielding modified Crosian plasma rifles. Human vehicles mounted with energy cannons stolen from our fallen walkers. And most disturbingly, humans wearing crude adaptations of our exoskeleton armor, making them nearly as strong as a Crosian warrior. I swallowed hard. Casualties? 30% of our ground forces in the first hour. I could feel my own carapace go rigid in horror. "Sir," Drex continued, "they are targeting command centers with precision strikes. Communications are failing across multiple sectors." And then, the worst news of all. "Sir," Drex's voice was hollow, "they have somehow obtained our encryption protocols. They are broadcasting false retreat orders on our command channels." I could barely comprehend what I was hearing. "What?" Drex nodded grimly. "They are using our own systems against us." The room spun. This wasn't just resistance. This wasn't just warfare. This was systematic dismantling. The humans weren't just fighting us, they were learning how to replace us. I turned to Caxi. "Options?" Caxi's voice was quiet. "Sir, at current loss rates, we will have no functional ground force within 2 human days." My claws tightened. "And the fleet?" "Vulnerable, sir. Their asteroid bombardment will begin within 3 days. They have also begun developing chemical agents that can be deployed into our life support systems." Commander Drex straightened. "We fight to the last Crosian, as honor demands." I exhaled sharply. "Drex, honor means nothing if we are all dead." Drex's exoskeleton darkened in anger. "The Supreme Commander ordered—" I know what he ordered. I turned to him, my voice sharp as a blade. "I also know what I am seeing." The words hung in the air for a long, tense moment. Finally, I turned to Caxi. "Prepare evacuation protocols for all ground forces." Drex inhaled sharply. "Sir, you can't be serious." "Lieutenant Caxi," I continued, ignoring Drex, "analyze optimal withdrawal patterns to minimize our vulnerability to asteroid strikes." I straightened my posture, looking at them both. "I'm going to speak with Admiral Patel." Drex stepped forward. "Sir, the Supreme Commander will have your carapace mounted on his wall." I turned slowly, staring into Drex's compound eyes. "The Supreme Commander is not here, Drex." My voice was low and cold. "He is not the one watching his entire occupation force get systematically annihilated by creatures who have only just begun to understand interstellar war." Drex froze. I gestured toward the battlefield footage. "What kind of species does this?" I whispered. No one answered, because the answer was obvious. The most dangerous species in the galaxy, and we had just forced them to evolve. The fall of an empire, the rise of a new power. The holographic projection of Admiral Patel flickered into view. Unlike our previous meeting, she was no longer wearing formal diplomatic attire. Instead, she stood clad in battle armor, her expression unreadable. In the background, I could hear the hum of a command center. human officers barking orders, strategic displays flashing with updated battle data. She did not greet me. She simply stared. I exhaled. "Admiral Patel," I began carefully. "I assume you are watching the situation unfold." Patel's expression did not change. "You assume correctly." I hesitated. "We require a reassessment of our current arrangement." Patel finally moved, leaning forward slightly. "You mean you're ready to surrender?" Drex, who stood behind me, tensed in fury. "The Empire does not surrender." Patel's lips curled upward slightly, exposing teeth. "That's a funny thing about empires," she said softly. "They all think they're eternal, right up until they aren't." Drex's mandibles clacked violently, but I silenced him with a raised claw. I turned back to Patel. "We are prepared to withdraw from Earth," I said, "but your terms will need to be adjusted." Patel's eyebrow raised slightly, a human sign of intrigue. "Go on." I chose my words carefully. "We need safe passage for all remaining Crosian forces. Your forces will cease hostilities until our withdrawal is complete." Patel tilted her head. "And in exchange?" I exhaled. "In exchange, the Crosian Empire will formally recognize Earth as a sovereign interstellar power and will establish a non-aggression pact with humanity." A long silence followed. Then Patel's expression shifted, just slightly. Not quite a smile, but something close. "Admiral Vorzac," she said, "you might just be smarter than the rest of your species." I ignored the insult. "Do we have an agreement?" Patel's eyes darkened slightly. "That depends." I frowned. "On what?" She leaned in. "Are you speaking for the Crosian Empire, or just for yourself?" Drex hissed behind me. I felt my claws tighten. The answer should have been simple, but it wasn't, because I already knew what Supreme Commander Ziltherok's response would be. He would reject the negotiation. He would send the 7th Fleet. He would throw 20 million more Crosians into this war. And by the time they arrived, the humans would have already adapted to counter them. They had cracked our encryption systems. They had reverse-engineered our weapons. They had weaponized their own asteroids. And worst of all, they were just getting started. I exhaled slowly, letting the realization solidify within me. Then I looked back at Patel, and I made my decision. "I am speaking for the Crosian forces under my command," I said, "not the Empire." Patel studied me carefully. "Then we have a deal. The death of a conqueror's dream." One rotation cycle later, the withdrawal began. Crosian ships lifted off from human-occupied territory, heading toward the upper atmosphere. Human aircraft and drones shadowed them the entire way, ensuring no tricks were played. From orbit, I watched the last Crosian transport leave Earth's surface. We were leaving in disgrace. For the first time in 8,000 years, the Crosian Empire had been forced to retreat. And I knew this was only the beginning, because Earth had changed. The humans were no longer a pre-FTL civilization. They had learned the secrets of interstellar warfare, and they would never be caught unprepared again. Commander Caxi, standing beside me, spoke quietly. "Sir, you should see this." He gestured to the holographic display. I turned my gaze to the feed, and my mandibles tightened. Humans were already dismantling our abandoned war machines. They weren't just studying them anymore, they were rebuilding them and improving them. I felt a terrible realization settle into my thorax. The Crosian Empire had made a mistake. We had seen humans as primitive. We had called them fragile. We had assumed that our technology, our thousands of years of interstellar dominance, would secure our victory. But humans had something far more dangerous than advanced technology. They had adaptability. And now They were preparing for the next war, one they would not lose. The trial of a traitor. The imperial tribunal was merciless. I stood before the great chamber, thousands of Crosian eyes watching from the tiered seating. Supreme Commander Ziltharak loomed above me, his expression cold and unforgiving. Admiral Vorzac, his voice boomed across the chamber. You stand accused of cowardice, treason, and the betrayal of the Crosian Empire. How do you plead? I straightened my posture, ignoring the ceremonial restraints on my limbs. Not guilty, Supreme Commander. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Ziltharak's mandibles clicked in anger. You abandoned an imperial conquest, surrendered Crosian territory, and fled like prey. I raised my voice. I conducted a strategic withdrawal in the face of an unprecedented threat, I said firmly, and I have evidence to prove it. Coxey activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber, and the truth was revealed. Humans had adapted. Humans had already begun building orbital defenses using Crosian technology. Humans had united into a single interstellar military force. Humans had become something new, something the Empire had never seen before, and they were growing stronger by the day. For the first time, Ziltharak looked uncertain. I drove my final point home. Had we stayed, the 7th Fleet would have arrived to find no surviving forces. I let the words settle. Then I spoke my final warning. You may still believe we are the strongest species in the galaxy, but we are not. I turned my gaze toward the display. A human child appeared on screen, disassembling a Crosian plasma rifle. Learning. Adapting. This is the future, I said, and we just taught them how to beat us. Epilogue. The birth of an alliance. 3 months later, I was summoned before the Empress herself. She had personally reviewed the human data, and she had made a decision. Admiral Vorzac, she said, her voice measured. You are to be reinstated. I blinked in shock. Furthermore, she continued, you are now the Imperial envoy to Earth. You will oversee diplomatic relations with humanity. I inhaled sharply. We are negotiating with them? The Empress's mandibles twitched. We must, she admitted, because one day they will outgrow us. And thus the Crosian Empire's greatest mistake became its greatest lesson. Because we had not conquered Earth. Earth had conquered us.